All right. So, welcome. I'm so glad you could all be here and celebrate with me on my 10th anniversary as a CZT. I cannot believe it's been that long. It really feels just like yesterday that I went to Providence and got my training with Rick and Maria, and I've been teaching ever since, absolutely loving it. And I wanted to find a way to sort of um, give back to the students that have supported me throughout my journey, also to meet some of the new students that I maybe didn't have a chance to meet, and just offer you a session that I designed myself and introduce you to my teaching and my little project that I came up with which actually didn't turn out to be such a little project. It turned out to be really quite in-depth and detailed, but I will walk you through all the steps and it will be no problem getting there. As I mentioned earlier before I recorded, I had a class in person on Friday and a class last Monday, and everybody seemed to really enjoy themselves. I haven't posted the mosaics yet because I wanted to keep the outcome of what we're doing a little bit of a surprise. But before we get going, I will show you quickly what we're going to end up with, because I know when I take classes, I kind of like to know where we're going, at least, even if I don't have it immediately in front of me the whole time. So, by way of background, I wanted to develop a class all of my own that had some themes of 10th anniversaries. And so I looked online for some of the symbolism that there is with oh, sorry. I guess I should mute everybody. If everybody could just mute themselves unless you have a question, that would be great. And then it'll be easier to for everybody to be able to concentrate. Trying to see how I would do that myself. I don't know if I can. Anyway, okay. Well, if everybody could just take care of that on their own, that would be great. So I looked at some themes of 10th anniversary, and the first one I found wasn't particularly inspiring to me. It was the traditional gifts for a 10th anniversary were tin or aluminum. I like the symbolism that they invoked, which was strength, durability, flexibility, and resilience. And I thought those are all good qualities that we can have as people and as artists. Then I found the modern gift, and it was diamonds. And I thought, okay, that is something that I can work with here in my project that I'm going to create. The colors that I found were traditional for 10th anniversary are silver and blue, which is why I suggested on my list that you bring a blue pen, because we're going to do most of our tangling in blue and add some silver accents later. And then the flower for 10th anniversary is daffodil. So I thought I would create a project that I've just called Diamonds and Daffodils. And it combines elements of a little bit more geometric with a little bit more organic, and we'll put those together to come up with our tile. And I will show you just quickly. Like I said, I don't like having it right in front of me because when I'm doing a project, because I don't want to get into the whole comparanoia thing and trying to make it exactly like what it's supposed to look like. Because I'll tell you, in my two classes that I taught in person, everybody kind of went their own way and it was wonderful. So here's one that I did on a tan tile. And then here's one that I did on a gray tile. So either of them will work, gray or tan. It's your choice. I'm going to work on a gray today because I've just been kind of alternating which colors that I'm using. And
Could you show the tiles again? I didn't see them pop
sure,
up anywhere.
I went too quick. There's the tan.
I'm not seeing it. Maybe if you held it up by your face.
Is it, do you have the shared screen
Yes.
open?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, because it's under my camera, it's on the share. Does anybody else have any trouble seeing it or?
No, it's there. But
There?
if you, the person who asked, are you on an iPad or a computer?
iPad.
swipe to the left and see if you get the speaker view or put it on speaker view.
There we go. Got it. Thank you.
You're very
Perfect.
welcome.
Oh, thank you for helping there.
You're welcome. And the mute all is under
Yes.
participants for you. If you click on participants and you get the participants list,
Oh,
Awesome.
yes.
it's right there.
Ah, there we go.
You
Okay.
got it. I love it.
Perfect.
You
Thank
got
you so
it.
much. And I will mute everybody just because it's easier for everyone to concentrate. But at any point in time, if you have any questions or you need me to slow down or you need me to repeat something, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself to ask that question. So that will be fine with me. Okay. So that's the project we're going to do. I love the balance of the way it worked out with the geometric and the organic part is kind of this new little pattern that I devised. I wouldn't say it's a traditional tangle pattern because I know that with traditional tangle patterns, you're really supposed to only have 2 or 3 steps and it's supposed to be really very basic. And this one is more like a deconstruction of the idea of a daffodil. So it's not difficult to draw, but I'm going to call it my own tangle pattern anyway, even though it's not your typical type of tangle pattern. So just before we get started, I invite you to just kind of clear your space and get comfortable in your chair. Think about things that you have to be grateful for, things that you have to be thankful for. I know that when I approach a class, one of the things that I'm so grateful and thankful for is the time to create, just the time to set aside and not think about anything else that's going on, just to focus on this piece of paper in front of me and the intentions that I'm putting into my artwork. So whatever it is that you're thankful for or grateful for, I just invite you to focus on that for just a moment and then we'll get started. So in terms of your supplies, I'm just going to quickly go through what we're going to use. We're going to do a lot of work at the beginning in pencil. We're going to set out I'm going to call it a string. There's a lot of it that maybe in some cases people will go straight in with pen, but I'm going to encourage you to do this mapping out what we're going to do in pencil first so that you're able to confidently ink it in without thinking too much about worrying about mistakes because there are no mistakes. So that's kind of the approach I'm going to take with working in pencil. We're going to do a little bit of our work in pen, black pen, and I suggested either an O1 or a PN. I'm going to use a PN because I find that when I go back in later to, as Rick and Maria say, give it a little extra love and retrace those lines, that a PN is a little bit more robust and forgiving, and it allows you to get that nice bold line. So I'm going to use a PN, but if you're more comfortable with an O1, that's fine too. We're going to do most of our tangling in blue, and I chose O1 because this design is it's very much me in the sense that it's very small drawing. And I know not everybody that's their way of drawing, but I tend to draw quite small. And I thought, well, I'm creating this class for my anniversary, so I want this to express a little bit of what how I enjoy tangling. So I chose the O1 just to give us a little bit more room to put ink down. And then I've got the white charcoal and a blender for each for the pencil and the white charcoal. We're going to do highlights and shading at the end. And then the very last step we're going to do is some embellishments with a silver metallic in line with the themes of the 10th anniversary and a white jelly roll. I've got a 10, but really any size is fine, whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever works, because we all know how temperamental white jelly rolls can be. So as long as it works for you, then that's what you need. I do have a small ruler, but that's optional. You can use anything that's a straight edge, or you can even just eyeball it. I'm using a ruler just for one small step in this process. And I also have a couple of erasers. I have a regular size and I have a precision one. they're not absolutely, it's not absolutely necessary to have the precision one, but if you have it in your stash, it's going to be a little bit easier on you for one part of it. And then finally, in addition to your tile, I've got the Marcus operandus, and hopefully you either had one or you were able to print the one I had. It's something, what we're doing is something that you could eyeball, but I just find it so much easier to put those initial marks down with something that guides you. And this Marcus operandus is a really handy tool for that. So I'm going to invite you to take whichever color tile you chose and your pencil, and start by placing your tile on the Marcus operandus. And we're going to be putting a little tick mark on the edge of your tile at each point where there's a little circle, either above the number or on its own. So the first one is at 1. It's got that little circle. The second one is that mark just before 2. The third one is on the side. Fourth one is just after the 3. The fifth one is just before the 5. Then there's one between 5 and 6. And then there's one just after 6. So that should give you 8 little tick marks. And if you have a ruler, this is the time to bring it out. Did I forget one? I think I forgot one. My apologies, I forgot the one at the 4. I'm sure you all were ahead of me on that though. So I'm going to bring out my ruler, or if you just have a straight edge, or if you just want to eyeball it, that's fine. And we're going to connect the opposite points with a line. And I wouldn't worry about doing it too lightly. I mean, you don't want to press really hard to engrave it in there but we are going to go back in and erase all our guidelines when we're done. So you don't have to worry too much about making them too faint. So you're basically going to be making 4 lines that divide your Zentangle into 8 wedges. And as I mentioned, at any time, if I get going too quickly, just please unmute yourself and ask me to wait a minute so you can catch up. As I mentioned, I've done this class twice and I've done it myself offline 3 times. So when you've done a project many times, you do tend to go a little bit quickly through the steps, and I don't want to have anybody feel like they're being left behind. So for the rest of the measurements we're going to do, we're just going to use our pen lid. Everybody's got the Micron pens, and all the lids are a standard size. So we're going to use that as our measurement tool rather than worrying about inches or centimeters or anything like that. So the first measurement we're going to use this clip on the pen lid, just the clip part. And if you want to just watch me for the first one, then you can go ahead and do yours. I'm going to place it on any of those lines with the edge of the clip at the end of the tile. And then I'm going to make a little mark on the end of the clip. And I'm going to do that on every other line. So I'm going to skip the next one and then go to the one after that and do the same thing. Then I'll skip the next one, go to the one after, and mark it there. And then the final one, skip the next one, move to the one after that, and make the mark. So when you're done, you should have 4 markings on every other line. All of these things that I'm marking off technically are things that could be eyeballed, but I find myself that I prefer, when I'm doing something that's very geometric, to really have those initial markings down evenly, just because it makes me personally feel better about my end project. But I did want to get away from having to use rulers and measurements. So whoever it was that came up with the idea of using the pen cap as a measuring tool, hats off to you, because I think that's a brilliant way of doing it. So then the next step we're going to do is using this little silver part on the top of the pen cap as the measurement. And I use from the base of the silver right up to where there's a little nub on the end that has the number of the pen. I use it all the way to that line. And once again, I'll show you what I'm going to do, and then you can follow along and do your own. So I'm going to position that silver part right on that one of those points we just made. And then I'm going to make a mark on my paper over at the end of the cap. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side of it. This time I'll put the end of the cap on the line and make a mark on the silver part. So what you end up with are 3 points in a row. And we're going to do that to all 4 of the lines. This project, you will find yourself turning your tile a lot, and I encourage you to do so. That's something I say in my classes all the time, is one of the things: turn your tile, because it's so much better to keep your hand in a comfortable position to draw and move the tile instead of moving your arm. So we've now got 4 of the lines marked with 3 little points, one on the line and one on either side of the line. We're going to use these marks to lay out our first diamond shapes. And these diamond shapes are going to be kind of a longer, skinnier diamond. So I'm not going to use my ruler for this. I'm just going to eyeball it, because I think it's a short enough line, but if you're more comfortable using your ruler, you certainly can. I'm going to start from the top of one of these lines and draw a line down to my first point. And then from that point down to the center. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side of it, from the top down to that point, from the point down to the center. And one little tip, you may have heard this before, but one little tip I heard years ago, and it has helped me immensely, is when you're trying to draw a straight line, rather than look at your line, look at the destination you're going to. So in this case, you would be drawing your line and you would be looking at the point you were going to. And that will help you draw a straight line and land on your target. I think the analogy they gave when I first heard about it was, when you're driving, you're not looking at your steering wheel, you're looking at the road ahead, you're looking at the destination, and that helps you stay in your lane and get to the place you're going. And it's the same with drawing lines, and I just have found that so helpful over the years. So continue working your way around those 4 points, drawing your diamond shapes. And remember, of course, we're working in pencil. So if at any point you're not happy with a line, this is Zentangle Inspired Art. This is not traditional Zentangle. I am not going to be the eraser police, and I'm not going to be the ruler police. So you could do whatever is going to make you the happiest with your project. I always find it's a bit of a balance between not being a perfectionist, you don't want that, and not getting hung up on your mistakes, but also being happy with the end result. So if erasing a line and redrawing it is going to make you happier with the end result, then I say more power to you. So we've got our 4 skinnier diamonds. Now we're going to work on creating some what kind of look like faceted diamonds, like the kind that would be in a ring. And the first step for this, and again, you can use your ruler if you want, but I'm just going to eyeball it, is we're going to join these middle points on each diamond with a straightish line. And I'll always say straightish because it's the same as when we call a circle an orb. We just want to not focus on perfection. We just want to get those lines down. So all the way around your Zentangle, just join up those points. And that will form part of your second set of diamonds. Now for the next step, we're going to be using the same measurement part, that little silver cap on your pen, and you can position that on the line above the line you just drew, and just put a little mark on that line all the way around. The next step is going to be the top of the diamond. And this one I didn't do a measurement for. I'm just going to suggest that you kind of eyeball it. And remember, we're doing this in pencil, so you can erase it if you need to. But we want to start a little way in from this line, and we want to end a little way in from that end. So meeting the dot you just made, just make a line that goes centered on that one below with just a little bit off each edge, because that edge is going to be where we do the or the slanted facets of the diamond. And once you have those lines in place, you can connect this corner to the end of your line. And if you find that you didn't do it quite long enough, you can always extend it. If you found it went too far, you can erase a little bit. But this is kind of the look you want to get, as if it's a cut diamond. Seems like people are generally getting close to done. So we'll move on to the next step. What we want to do is focus on this triangle, the bottom half of your diamond, and we're going to bisect it into three. So this middle line is eventually going to go away. What we're going to do is just kind of guess where a third would be. So you've got 1, 2, 3, and just ignore that middle line. And we're going to do that on all of them. And then this is the first time we're going to break out our eraser. And we're going to erase that middle line just on the bottom half. You want to leave it on the top part of your diamond, but we're just going to erase that line. Now, technically, technically we don't really have to erase it because it all gets covered over with tangling. But once we've got our string mapped out, we're going to go through with our black pen and redefine the lines. And I find myself that if I don't have to think too much about, okay, avoid this line, don't do that line, I'm a lot more relaxed. So I feel as though if I erase lines that I don't want to retrace or reemphasize the lines, it just makes it a lot more of a Zen experience for me. So that's why I'm taking the time to take that middle line out. So we've divided the bottom part of our faceted diamond. Now we're going to do something on the top. And if you just want to watch me, you'll get the hang of it really quickly. We want to create facets on this top part. So you've still got this middle line, this guideline. We're going to start by connecting the point at the top of that line to one of those lines you just drew on the bottom, and then do the same on the other side. And then you can connect the corner to the lines you just drew. So basically what you've done is you've drawn a W, and that creates several different facets on the top of your diamond. Then we're going to take our eraser and just take out the rest of that middle guideline on the diamond. You can leave the part above it for now. We'll just take out that middle line there. Now for the next step, I'm always a person who likes to border my tiles. And I was also kind of playing with the idea of celebration, and I wanted something that felt a little bit like a banner around the edge. So what I did was I'm creating sort of scallops, I guess you could say, or it's going to make rice shapes around the edge. I'm going to use these middle guidelines and the points of the diamonds, and I'm just going to draw a curved line from the point to the guideline. And I'm going to do that all the way around, just adding those curved lines to create rice-shaped banners all the way around. So one little bit of erasing and our string is complete. We're just going to take out these final guidelines above your faceted diamond. So just give a minute for everybody to catch up. Maybe if you want to give me a thumbs up when you're ready to move on, and I'll know that Everybody's ready? All right. So, oh, my apologies. There's one more thing to erase. We're going to erase these guidelines in the skinny diamonds. The only thing you want to leave behind, it's not a huge deal if you don't, but you can leave behind that center mark just to help you find the middle again later. But we'll erase the guidelines themselves. And once again, we could technically have left them there and just tangled over them. But for the next step, we're going to be re-inking, or we're going to be inking in the lines. And it just is one less thing to have to worry about concentrating on avoiding inking in that line. So when you finish that part, I ask you to take your black pen. And again, I recommend a PN, but if you want to use an O1, that is fine. And what we're going to do is just ink in every one of those lines that we did. The only thing on your tile that you're not going to ink in are these little dots in the middle of the skinny diamonds. Those are just markers for later. Everything else you can ink in. And I really encourage you to just go slowly, methodically, enjoy the process, enjoy the feeling of the ink on the paper and creating this lovely string. And just take your time. Always remembering to breathe. I know that breathing is natural, and yet so many times when we're creating, we hold it and hunch our shoulders, and this is meant to be relaxing. So if it helps you, maybe after each pen stroke, take a deep, intentional breath.
Did you say we're doing this in black?
This is in black, yes. This is really the only part of the tile that we're going to do in black. I always find inking in pencil lines very, very relaxing because there's really no decisions to be made. You've already got those marks on the paper. You're just redefining them with pen. And you can just let your mind relax and enjoy the process without any kind of stress or planning or worry. Just carry on doing what you're doing, but once you've finished inking in your lines, give it a second or two to just let the ink dry. And then what I usually like to do after re-inking or after inking over pencil lines is I just like to take away the pencil. And I know when you do that, you lose a little bit of the darkness from the ink, but we at the end are going to go back and give this part a little bit extra love with the pen. So don't worry too much about it fading. I just like to clean it up a little. So going around with my eraser and just getting rid of those pencil lines. I always feel like I take liberties with Zentangle Inspired Art that I understand are not in the true spirit of Zentangle. And for regular Zentangle tiles, I do try to focus on not worrying about erasing or rulers or anything like that and just enjoying the Zentangle process. But for Zentangle Inspired Art, I think it's okay that we're a little bit more willing to break some rules. The only thing I'm going to leave behind here is that middle dot. And it's not even really crucial that you leave that because it's pretty easy to tell where the middle is, but it just helps you have a little bit of a guideline for where to go. So you can set aside your black pen for now. And we're going to start doing some work in the blue pen. So the first step, as they always say, when in doubt, aura, I'm going to invite you to add some auras to a couple of the places on this tile. It's going to be a fairly skinny aura, so hopefully you're comfortable drawing a little bit tight like that. I like putting the aura in because I feel like that little bit of extra white space helps to set apart the design and really help it to stand out. So the first aura we're going to do is going to be in these skinny diamonds. And I'm going to take my blue pen and basically just draw a smaller diamond within it by adding a very thin aura line along the edge. This is another one where it's really important to remember to turn your tile. I know I always feel that I have a little more control over my pen when I'm drawing facing the line that I am adding the aura to. So if that means turning your tile to make it easier on yourself, then that's what you should do. Remembering to breathe and relax. So once you've got your auras done on the skinny diamonds, we're going to add auras to the scallop banner shapes on the side. Now you can aura on the inside of that black line, and then use the edge of your tile as if it was another black line to aura that. So basically, we're going to do a smaller rice shape inside that rice shape by adding an aura to each side. I know it gets a little tricky when you get close to the edge of your tile, but hopefully that will be something that you can just go slowly and get that nice line in there. I tend to go through and do all of my aura lines going in one direction first, and then flip my tile around and do the ones in the other direction, simply because I find it much more relaxing to do the same pen stroke over and over rather than turning my tile over and over. But of course, everybody needs to find their own rhythm and draw the way that is comfortable for you. And once again, I always find it so much easier to aura when I'm facing the line that I'm trying to aura. It just gives you much more pen control. When you're ready for the next step, I'm taking a fragment out of the Zentangle. I say primer, I think they say primer, whichever it is. You know, it's got great resources of fragments. And I went looking for something to fill our faceted diamond with. And I found what I think is the perfect fragment to make it look like a diamond. And the one I chose is B11. So it's just a simple 3 lines inside a triangle. Now, I will show you the way that I find the easiest to do this. Working inside one of these faceted diamonds, I always start by just putting a little dot in the middle of each triangle. And I will do that on the bottom ones too. You just kind of have to pick a spot that you decide that you want to do it. And then from each of the corners to that dot, we're going to draw a line. And what that does is it bisects the triangle into 3 smaller triangles. And to me, that I feel like that creates the illusion that the diamond has these extra facets. I was quite pleased when I found that fragment because I thought that is exactly what we need for this little space. Now, I, on my last class, and one of my students as well, did accidentally came down to the middle from one of the sides. And if you do that, totally all right. What we did was we just got a white pen and went over the line. And in the end, you really don't even notice. Zentangle is so forgiving. So there's one complete faceted diamond. And we'll go through and do all 4 of them the same way. Right. Hopefully everybody is catching all caught up on this. I'm going to demonstrate now my tangle that I created for this class, and I've got the step outs ready to upload in the chat. But before I upload them, I just want to demonstrate it for you, and I suggest that you either take a scrap piece of paper or the back of your tile or whatever you like to just practice it once, and then we can I'll send you the step out so that you have them to look at as we're going along. I don't think it's a complicated tangle. It's just that it's got a lot of steps. And I know tangle patterns are really not supposed to have too many steps. But what I called this one is Decadil, and that is deck for decade and daffodil. And it was kind of something I want to do since the daffodil is the flower for 10th anniversary. I thought that would be appropriate. I didn't want us to draw a daffodil. I wanted us to tangle a daffodil. So the step outs that I came up with are really just breaking it down into the idea of a daffodil. It's not meant to be a botanical drawing or anything like that. It's meant to be a tangle. So I will show you my interpretation of it. The way I decided to approach it was as if it was looking sort of straight on a daffodil rather than from the side. So I start this one with a little orb, and then I'm going to build the center by drawing an orb above, an orb below, and then two on each side. And that creates this center shape that's kind of even by doing those three stacked ones first. That gives you the even spacing, and that's going to become helpful later when we go to add part of the petals. Then to represent the, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better term, the trumpet of the daffodil, I do a little bit of a sort of a roughly circle around that center part. And it doesn't have to be even or balanced. Think of something organic and it's probably blowing in the wind a little bit. So we just want the idea of a roughly edge. And then what I do is I look for the little bump outs on the inside of that and just add a little curved line to, again, kind of emphasize the fact that it's roughly and three-dimensional. Now, one thing I will say is if you're doing this pattern larger, it gives you a ton of shading and highlighting opportunities. We're going to be doing it quite small on our tiles, so we will not have as many opportunities for that, although there will be some. I just suggest maybe if you enjoy the tangle, try it again on another tile that's a little bit larger and play around with shading and highlighting. So to begin drawing the petals, I'm first going to start. Every picture of a daffodil I saw had 6 petals. Now I don't know if that's standard or I just assume it's nature's nature being perfectly balanced, but it's got 6 petals. So I'm going to start with the first 3, and I'm going to look for that top orb and just draw first the center of my petal, just a long skinny center. And then I want 2 more evenly spaced. So what I do is I look for that orb right there in my center, and I'm going to draw another petal kind of coming out, or center coming out from there. And then I look for the one at the bottom there and just kind of come out from there. So you've got 3 relatively evenly spaced centers. Now to make these first 3 petals, what I'm aiming for is kind of a roundish petal with a little tip at the top. So I will start above the center that I just drew, just kind of come down and make a round petal. And then same on the other side. And I'll turn my tile and do the same thing on the other 2. So that gives me my first 3 petals. Then for the other 3, I'm going to go in between. I'm going to start by doing my skinny center on all 3 sides. And then do the same thing. The only difference here would be I would draw behind. So when I get to the ones I've already drawn, I'll just stop, and it's as if that petal had fallen behind. So that's my decadil, which is kind of my interpretation of what I would see when I'm looking straight down on a daffodil. And I will do my best here. I've got my step outs. I have put them in the chat. Hopefully, you'll be able to just download them. It's a PDF. And if you have any troubles at all with them, just later send me an email to the address where I sent you the login instructions, and I will happily send you the file by email. But hopefully, most of you will be able to download it from here. And I think that, as I said, I don't think it's a super complicated tangle, but there are a few steps. One of the things I will mention is that I had this happen myself a couple times, and a couple of my students did, is drawing that center and then forgetting to do the ruffled part and just getting straight into doing the petals. So kind of have to mindfully remember to do the center trumpet part, because that kind of is what makes it the daffodil rather than just another flower. Just in terms of shading this, you can see a little bit of example on my step out sheet of shading. It's a little hard to tell because at that point it's photocopied and scanned, and hopefully you can tell a little bit, but you all know you've probably done a lot of Zentangle in your time, and so you know what kind of shading to do. But when you have enough space, I would tend to add a little bit of graphite kind of around those ruffles. Just very sparingly. I would add a little bit around those center pieces, and then take your blender and soften them a little bit. We're just kind of trying to add a level of depth. This is not sketch paper, so it's just not necessarily going to look the way it would look if you did it on a proper tile or something like that. I would also add some shadow behind the overlapped petals. I won't take the time to do all of them because I know you probably all know just as much about shading as I do, or maybe more. So I'm just demonstrating a little bit where that overlap is. I might even put some at the top just to maybe create the illusion of it curling back a little bit. If I was doing this on a colored tile, I would probably put some white in the middle just to raise that petal up and give it some dimension. And I would also add some shading around the outside of the trumpet to just kind of cast that shadow on the petal behind it. And of course, if you're working on colored tile, which we are and we will be later, adding some little white highlights in the center, maybe on the center of the petal. But there's all sorts of shading opportunities you can do with this one if you're working in a larger scale. We, of course, are going to be working in a very, very tiny scale. So I will just encourage you, when it does come to the shading part, that you use the graphite really sparingly and just touches here and there. And I'll demonstrate when we get to that how we want to do that. So we're back now with our blue pen, and we're going to concentrate on drawing a few of those daffodils. And we're going to put one in each of these longer diamonds. And then we're going to put one at the top of each of the faceted diamonds. The one outside here above the faceted diamond, you'll be able to have a little bit more room. The one in here gets pretty tight. So we're just going to have, the way I look at it is if these diamonds are actually diamond shaped windows that you're looking through, and you're seeing that floral pattern behind it, and it's going to fall behind that window. So that's kind of how I look at that one. I start where you've got your little mark in the middle with my orbs. One in the middle, and then the one above and below, and then two on either side. And as you can see, I'm working very, very tiny. So anybody who's taken a class from me and has seen my art over the years, you know, tiny is my comfort zone. So I apologize if it's too tight for you. If you want to work bigger, you absolutely can. You just will not have as much of the flower show. So whatever works for you is fine. So then we're going to go and put this little ruffle in of the trumpet. And then add the little extra ruffly bits on the bump outs. Then we add that first skinny piece, evenly spaced around 3. And as you can see here, it's falling behind that diamond-shaped window. So you're just seeing a part of it. And then the petal, again, it'll fall behind the window, depending on how large you draw. So you're really just getting an idea of that flower. So I've got my first 3 petals, and I'm going to squeeze in those other ones in between, just as a suggestion of where they are. So we've got that little daffodil peeking out behind the window. Now, I always like with a piece to add a little bit of drama in terms of inking in. So with your blue pen, I like to go in and just ink in whatever is remaining of that diamond that isn't flower. So you'll probably have some at the top and the bottom. Depending on how large you did your piece, you might have these little tiny bits in between the petals. That will just kind of be up to you to figure out where that goes. But I find that in the end composition, having those little bits of inked in area adds that anchoring and a little bit of a focus. So I always like to try to include something like that in my tiles. So that's kind of how it may look on yours, or it may not if you did it smaller or larger, but something along those lines, fitting that daffodil pattern in the middle of your diamond. So I'm going to go all the way around and just repeat that 3 more times. And if they're not exactly the same, that's absolutely perfect, because this is nature and it's organic and it's not meant to be a carbon copy. When I first started tangling, this is actually more than 10 years ago, because I was a tangler before, 2 years before I became, or 3 years before I became a CZT. But when I first started, I really, really did not enjoy inking in. I think I was just impatient and I wanted to get to the end and see how my project would look finished. And inking in, I just found to be a nuisance. And I found that maybe my technique was wrong too, because I was pressing too hard and the paper would pill and I get gaps in my ink and all sorts of stuff. But I'm very thankful that over the years that my interest level has refined to the point where I actually love inking in. I used to grab the thickest pen I could find to try to make it go quickly. And now I just really enjoy the process of feeling that ink on the paper, enjoying watching the space fill up with ink. It's just such a relaxing process for me. And so I guess all that to say that if there's something about art or tangling or something that you really don't enjoy, it's not necessarily going to be that way forever. It might end up becoming something that you enjoy and embrace. I also didn't enjoy drawing printemps, and that has now become one of my go-to filler patterns. So once again, you never know how your style and your journey will evolve. So once you've got your four uh, diamonds filled, you can add the pattern above each of these faceted diamonds. So just kind of estimate where the middle of that space is to start drawing your center. And again, once you touch one of the edges, you just draw behind this scalloped border and behind that diamond. But you'll probably have a little bit more room to do more of a full flower here. I always love tiles that combine geometric with organic. I just think they balance each other off really nicely. And then also when you have that bit of inking in that gives you that weight and that focus, that I think really, really helps. So we're going to add, when you're ready, no rush, but we're going to add another little pattern that I will demonstrate, but it's one of the easiest patterns ever. So I don't imagine that it'll be a difficulty. So this one was deconstructed by another CZT, Margaret Bremner, who many of you I'm sure know of, and it's available on tanglepatterns.com, but it's a really simple design. It's basically just a line with sort of randomly placed bead shapes on it. I don't think there's really any rhyme or reason or count how many they're going to be, but it's just that simple. And I wanted to add an embellishment to this tile that felt a little bit like we've got our banners here. I wanted some more streamers maybe, and something that just added a little bit of movement and whimsy. So where I put bead lines on this one is from the corners of these skinny diamonds over to your flower. And I just add my random beads wherever it looks good. And then I'll do the same from the other side of that point. And add my beads. And that just to me had kind of the feeling of a streamer or something like that, some kind of garland that was hanging and giving a little bit of movement. So you can add those to all of the sections. And I don't ever worry about matching them, having the same amount of beads. It's meant to be random, I think. Just whatever fits in your space. For the next pattern, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Duda, which is one of the Zentangle official patterns, but I'll just show you really quickly, just in case you haven't done it. Between your borders, you would do alternating lines where the first one or one of them comes from that top border almost down to the bottom border. And then the next one starts a little bit below that top border and goes all the way down. The only reason I draw it that way is because I find it more comfortable drawing towards me. But if you wanted to go down and then up, you can do that too. But the idea is that every other one of them is just below one line and the other is just below the other line. And so it kind of creates a look of a zipper. And I think I remember Maria saying in one of their videos that that was kind of how they came up with the name, was that zippity doodah, because it looked like a zipper. So that is the doodah pattern. And we're going to use that to create kind of a background texture in these scallops. And usually what I do when it's an irregular shape like this, just to make it easier on myself, I'll kind of start in the middle. You can start at the end if you like, but it's a little tricky to see. So I usually start in the middle and start working my way out to the corner. And of course, as it gets smaller and smaller, your lines get smaller and smaller. So that's kind of why I find it easier to start in the middle, just so you can see better. And then when I'm done that, I will flip it over and finish the other side. I find that Duda is another one of those very calming, meditative patterns, because it's just these repetitive lines over and over. And there's not really much thought involved. You're just inking in those lines. And I just find it incredibly relaxing to draw that one. give everybody a minute to catch up, and then we will start doing some shading and highlighting to add some depth and dimension to our design. This is always a point where I love to just look at what I've done so far and admire the work that went into it and the composition. And I always think these patterns look so beautiful even before shading. And then you go to add the shading and the highlighting, and it's like that magic touch, the icing on the cake. It really just brings it to life. So when you're ready, if you want to grab your pencil and your white charcoal and then a blender for each one. Usually what I tend to do is do all the shading first and then the highlighting, but with the nature of the shading and highlighting on this, I think I'm going to do a little bit of both so that we finish each area completely before moving on to the next one. Now, in terms of shading, you all know that Zentangle art is not non-representational. There's no up or down. In this case, even more so because we've got a pattern that no matter which way you turn it, it's got some similarities. So we're not worried too much about trying to do accurate shading with a light source and proper shadows and everything. Our shading and highlighting is meant to create depth and dimension and interest and that sort of thing. So with the diamond shading, I'm not going to get too worried about exactly which facet should be shaded and which one should be highlighted to try to create that illusion. I've done it a little bit different on all of the other ones I did before, and I think I have 5 completed tiles before this, and each time I feel like it created the illusion of a faceted diamond, and I did not put too much concern about where exactly to put the shading. So if you want to kind of follow along with me on that, if you want to do your own shading, it will all be beautiful in the end, I promise you. So what I usually have tended to do is I kind of start down in the point and just add just a really little bit of graphite on either side. I'm working fairly sparingly with the graphite because of course you can always go back later and add more if you need it. I add a little bit on each side of that center triangle, maybe a little up in the corner and on the top. And again, I'm not really too worked up about getting this exactly the way it's supposed to be. It's just, I'm just putting graphite here and there, emphasizing some of those corners, shading in some of the facets, just kind of honestly kind of feeling my way around on this one and not being too hung up on it being precise shading. The only thing I would caution is that you really don't want to use too much graphite. And once I've got it kind of spaced out here and there on those facets, I'm just going to go back in with my blender and just soften it a little bit, draw it out a little bit. I want to maintain some areas of white, so I'm really not going to spread it too far. I'm just going to soften the edges of it a little bit. Basically, I think the idea of this shading is just to create a little bit of movement so that your eye isn't quite sure which part is lower, which part is higher. We've got a lot of different facets, and the shadows will emphasize that, and then the shading will, or the highlights will emphasize that as well. So I've just gone through and softened that graphite. Then I'll take my white chalk pencil and just add it in where there isn't graphite. And I'm going right over that blue because I kind of want to mute the blue a little bit. We're not going to retrace those lines. We're just going to have it kind of be fading a little bit behind the white. I'm being quite generous with my white charcoal. I just really like that nice bright whiteness. And then I'll go in with my blender, and all I'm doing really is blending it enough to remove the crumbs of the white chalk and not really I'm not really pushing it into the paper too much. I want to keep that bright whiteness, but I'm just softening it, blending it into where the graphite is, and getting rid of the loose chalk. And I think by not even really worrying too much about where any of the chalk or the graphite goes, I've kind of created the look of a sparkling faceted diamond. And especially one of my favorite things to do is when I'm shading and highlighting is compare the area that's complete to the area that is not complete. And you really do see how much magic the graphite and the chalk creates for you. So if you want to work your way around and do something similar to each of your faceted diamonds, and they're not meant to be identical, the light might be shining on them in different ways. We're not going to be too worried about that. If you're not sure where some graphite might be needed, hold it out at arm's length and see what catches your eye. I think every one of mine that I've done has been basically quite different, and I think they all ended up looking relatively authentic, bearing in mind that this is meant to be a tangle and not an actual representation of a diamond. During this class yesterday, when I did my live class, one of my students said she was thinking now about going shopping because she was thinking about diamonds and wanting to get something. Of course, you can always go back when you finished shading and highlighting these and add some more graphite, especially in the corners, just to add some more depth. I just always encourage people to be a little bit sparing with the graphite at first because you could certainly go back and add more, but it's a little bit harder to take it away. I never really find that erasing graphite shading is a great strategy. Just never really quite looks blended properly. Well, I've got my 4 diamond shaded, and when you're ready to move on to your decadil pattern, I think so much of your shading and highlighting is going to depend on how large or small you drew your flowers. So I will leave it up to you to judge how much graphite you need. The only thing I would suggest is you maybe wouldn't do as much shading as you would if it was a larger pattern. In my little one here, I think what I'm going to do is just add some graphite around the edge of that trumpet. I'm not going to do any on the inside just because I think it's a little bit crowded. I'm going to add a little bit here where those petals overlap. I'm really being very, very sparing with it. And then I'm going to soften it to blend it out a little. And then I'm going to take my white chalk and just do a little bit on that petal. I'm also going to put some white chalk on the inside between the edges of that trumpet and the center part just to brighten it up. And then I'll just blend it softly. So it's very, very subtle shading, but if you again look at it compared to the other ones, I'm going to soften that transition a bit between the light and the dark. It's amazing how it always looks so very different on the screen as it does in person. So you can't always tell exactly the way it is supposed to be. I think I'm also going to add a little bit on the tip of these petals just to add some dimension. So I'll go around and do something similar on all of those inside the diamond ones. If your centers are a little bit bigger than mine, you could always add some shading on the inside. I've got my shading done on my inside diamonds, and now I'm going to do similar shading to the flowers on the outside. And you might have a little bit more room to add a little bit more graphite on these ones, but you're probably going to end up doing something very similar, shading outside the trumpet, where those petals overlap, and then adding some white highlighting on the petals. When you finish shading your flowers, you can go around the edge and do the scallops for the banner. And the way that I usually do that one is graphite in the corners of each of those rice shapes. And the way I blend this one is using kind of a flicking motion to just kind of draw it out to the center so that it's darker in the corner and just kind of fades off into the middle. And then I would add the white chalk kind of all over the middle to get that highlight. And then just soften it a little bit and ease the transition between the graphite and the white chalk. And this is one where I love looking at the before and after, where you see the shaded and highlighted one compared to the ones where nothing's been done. And it really does make a big difference. Sometimes I would also go back into the corners and just really darken those corners to add the extra level of dimension. Just softly blend that. You can go around and do that on all of them. I myself tend to go through and add all my graphite first and then go back and blend because for me, it's a little bit more mindful process when I'm not constantly picking up different tools and putting down other tools. So I like to just go through and put my graphite on first. But if you prefer to finish each one individually, then that is great too, whatever works best for you. Another little detail I like to add with my blue pen, probably should have done this before the shading, but it really doesn't matter, is just to finish it off here, I like to add a couple of, or a little sort of bead, a tipple with the highlight in each of these corners where the diamonds meet. It's just a little detail, but I just like the way that finishes off the pen work. And then the final bit of shading that I like to do on this piece is to go around the perimeter of your diamond shape. And I would go right over the flower. We're just kind of trying to take that center design and raise it up above the rest of it. So I would go all the way around with my graphite and then blend it. And I would also go all the way around the outside of the scallop to again raise up that sort of banner around the edge. So I'm putting all my graphite down first, and then I'll go back in with my blender and soften the edges and draw it out a little bit. I'm being slightly more generous here than I was before because I think I have a little bit of space that it's not going to get too muddy, and I want a nice strong shadow behind that diamond pattern. And this is where I think it would be handy to have a little bit of a scrap paper to put under your hand when you're shading under the border, just because it's really easy to smudge all your graphite and you don't want to do that. So when I'm going around this border, I'm shading right over top of the flower. Is my shared screen frozen for anybody else?
It's frozen for me. This
Yes,
is
it's
me.
frozen. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not
Yes.
sure why or what to do about that, but hopefully until it unfreezes, my voice will be able to guide you enough. But basically what I'm doing now is adding graphite around the outside of the border that overlaps the flowers. And then I'm going to blend it. I'm not quite sure how to unfreeze that unless I unshare it and then reshare it, but I'm scared if I do that, I might lose it altogether. So I'm going to try it and just see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll just have to guide you through the rest of the process. Let's see.
Laurel, now it's completely dark. Oh, I see it.
Did it come back?
Yes, it came
Okay.
back.
Excellent. Okay, so let's see. I'm just expanding it here. Let's just see if if I'm gonna be able to move or if it's just a still image. Let's hope. I'm just expanding it. Apologies for that because there's always technical difficulties. Looks like maybe it's okay, or is it's upside down now? That's of course.
Success.
Let's try this and see if it goes. Yeah, it's upside down, but upside down is better than nothing, right? Let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully that will work. So what I've done is I've added shading around the edges, and I'm just going to go now and soften it. I think while you're doing that, I'm going to try to fix this because I think I know what I need to do. There we go. Sorry about that. Now it should be the right way up. Don't want to make anybody dizzy. So I've softened the edges around the border, and now I'm just going to soften the edges around the diamond shape. So I wanted to introduce some silver into our design, since silver is one of the 10th anniversary colors. And I thought I would add a little bit of a background pattern. I feel like bead lines is sort of like a garland, and I want to do therefore, which is a Zentangle HQ pattern, as almost like the confetti that's being thrown for the celebration. So therefore is really just 3 dots. I believe it's a mathematical symbol for therefore. I'm not a math person, but I do think that's what it is. And it's just really those 3 dots. So I'm going to take my silver pen, and in the background, just wherever I have room, I'm just going to add little therefores as a background sparkle kind of pattern. I'm just using a silver jelly roll. I know there are some that are even more sparkly. I think, the Sparkle Pop pens, which are really nice to add that shine. But even the jelly roll gives you that little bit of shimmer and a look of kind of confetti being thrown as part of the celebration. You can just add it wherever you have room and wherever you feel it looks good. I usually just go right over top of the graphite. I always tend to do my silver and my white, any kind of metallics or things like that. I always tend to do that very last, because I want it to be up at the top above the graphite so that it's sparkling and highlighting things. And it's a fun pattern, I think, because it's so simple and it provides this lovely background texture to whatever it is you're doing.
Laurel, I have never heard of Therefore. Is it
Oh.
new? Is it old?
No, it's actually, I think it's been around quite a while. It's not one of the original tangles, but yeah, I don't even know when they started using it. But it's such a neat little background tangle. And I'm sure I've seen it in things like, wallpapers or upholstery designs as a background texture. And yeah, I don't know exactly when they named it, but it's a nice one to have in your resources.
It might actually be a stenographer symbol for therefore.
It could be too, yeah.
And I
Yeah,
know I used it in science when you were
right.
drawing a conclusion. You would use
Right.
the three dots as therefore I've
Exactly.
determined this.
Exactly. And like I said, I'm not a math or science person, so I'm just going on what I've been told. But I think it really does provide a really nice background texture. You probably can't really see it too well on my screen, but trust me that the silver is there in the background. And I'm going to do a little bit in the center too, just a single dot. Now that will depend on how black you have it in the center, if the silver is going to show up, but I'm just doing a little bit in the middle just to add to that silver. And then I'm going to take the white and do some brightening up here and there and highlighting. And I know that you will probably find all sorts of different places where you want to add white. And I encourage you just to kind of go your own way if you want to, or follow along with me. I'm going to start by adding just a dot of white in the center section of these flowers. Now, I'm barely even touching the pen to the paper. I'm just kind of holding it close enough to it that it deposits that little dot of white ink. And I think that brightens it up a lot. It adds a little bit of dimension to your flower and just highlights those center pieces. And the jelly roll, when it works, is just such a wonderful thing for this. Like, you just literally barely need to touch the paper. You're not really even drawing. You're just kind of touching it onto those orbs. And I'm working with a 10, which is thicker, and it's still working fine on those tiny little orbs. I'm going to add a little bit here and there on the centers of these petals just to add a little bit of a highlight. You can do that if you like, or if you would rather not, that's fine too. This is totally, at this point, your choice where you put these highlights and what works with your style of tangling. I just like, on a colored tile, adding those little hints of brightness, and the white jelly roll just does such a nice job of bringing out your design. And I'm really working with a very, very light hand here. I'm not depositing a lot of ink. I'm just kind of more putting a suggestion of it on there just as a brightener. I always feel like when the jelly roll works, it's an amazing tool. It's just the question of getting it to work, because I know, for me anyway, my white pens can be very, very finicky. Now I'm going to go to each of these little orbs that I put in the junctions of those diamonds, and I'm going to add some white where I have my highlight, which just really makes it pop. And I'm also going to go to each of these border parts and just add a little bit of white kind of right in the middle like that. I find that that adds a bit of shine and dimension. I'm just kind of not doing a single line, just kind of depositing a little bit right in the middle of that. And then the final step I like to do, I feel like it wouldn't be a proper diamond without adding a little bit of sparkle. So I'm going to take my white pen and just pick a couple of spots on the faceted diamond. And I'm just going to really lightly add like almost like a little asterisk or star in a couple of places. And that just gives the illusion that it's sparkling. This technically would probably work better with a finer gel pen, but I'm actually happy with how it's turning out with my 10. I think again, the secret is really not to press too hard and just to give the lightest of touches. And that is Diamonds and Daffodils. So the carry on working as long as you need to, but the final step is decide which is up or down. And on a tile like this, it really truly doesn't matter. And add your initials to wherever you can find a spot to add them. You can add your name on the back and just take a minute to admire and appreciate what you've created and be grateful for the time you were able to set aside to make something lovely. And I am going to, since you've seen mine enough, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if anybody has one that they would like to share, I would love you to share it. Oh, Liz, that's beautiful. Do you mind if I spotlight you to show everybody?
No, that's fine.
Okay. That's gorgeous. So beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. I love it.
No, I
I
love
love
doing
it.
it. It was very good. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so
Thank
glad you
you.
enjoyed.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Does anybody else want to share theirs? Deborah, let's put you up here in the spotlight. Gorgeous. I love it. I just
Yeah, it's
absolutely
lovely.
love how everybody's are so different every time. That is my favorite part of doing a class is at the end doing a mosaic and seeing just how everybody totally interpreted it their way, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Let's see, Deborah. Oh,
Mm.
gorgeous. Just gorgeous. I love it.
I really like doing this. You taught it so well. It's so
Yes,
easy to
exactly.
follow.
Oh, thank you so much. I had so much fun developing this class and coming up with the themes and putting it all together. My only concern was ever that it was going to be too much, too detailed. And I thought, no, you know what? We just go through step by step and it'll all come together. So, and it did from seeing your work. It's just beautiful.
You taught it so well. I really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Let's see Melissa here. Oh, beautiful. I
Mm.
love it.
I did
Just
use a
like
little bit of
that.
blue chalk to just
Oh, good
add
idea.
to it.
I like that idea. That's great.
Mm.
Yeah, carry on with the blue theme and everything. That's really pretty. I love how that makes the diamonds look even more faceted with the blue
And I
and
used
the
a blue metallic for the therefore
oh,
because my silver wouldn't
nice.
work. And it was great.
Nice. I love it.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Thank you so
The
much.
The one thing that I did not take time to do in this class because I was sensitive about people's schedule, and I would suggest, if you have time to go back and do that, is to take your PN and just restate your black lines of the diamonds and of the outside of that scallop. You may not think it makes a lot of difference, but it really, really does make it pop. So, as I said, I wanted to keep this a little bit, to the right time. And I just encourage you to always do that. Rick and Maria's adding a little extra love, going back and just restating those lines, but you don't need me for that. You know how to do that. So that would be the only final step I would suggest. And if anybody is comfortable sending me picture of what you did, I would love to put together a digital class mosaic and post it online just to show what everybody did. So when you're finished, if you're comfortable taking a photo and sending it, you can just reply to the email that I sent you with the info. I'll wait a couple of days, and then whichever ones I've received, I will put them in the mosaic together and post it for the world to see. Amy, you've got one. Let me just see yours. Lovely. I love that shade of blue too. That's
Oh,
really pretty.
I used two blues. I used the Micron blue, but I also used a Stabilo, which I
Oh,
don't think is
okay.
archival, but it was a really pretty turquoise.
It is. That's a gorgeous blue. I love
And
it. It sparkles.
and I'm a very slow tangler, so I've not gotten to doodah and I've not
Oh,
gotten to
no
bead
problem.
lines. And
No problem. But
I have a few other ideas for things I might put in here, but I
oh,
don't know if I
sure.
like them more than the doodah because I really do like the doodah, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the art of what if, and I'm like, oh, what if I did blah blah blah?
That's That's right,
Um,
exactly. There's always so many options. I always like Duda just because it makes a nice background texture, but
mhm.
I am totally fine if you want to do whatever you want to do on yours. I had one student in my class yesterday who just kind of went her own way, and she did a gorgeous tile that had the basic center part of it and then all kind of her own thing, which was really beautiful. So I always think that's one of the things I love is that Zentangle gives you the freedom to either follow directions or not. You can just kind of do what you want and it works. So
Well,
that
this
is
was so much fun,
beautiful.
and I love your Daffodil.
Oh, thank you. That
I
is
think
honestly, that's the first pattern I've ever deconstructed. So I've never really been a person who looks at things and deconstructs them. I make the patterns other people do, but I've never done my own. But I really wanted a daffodil. And I remembered from my training as CZT, and many of you probably remember this, is learning vertigo. And Rick and Maria saying, you're not drawing a sprig of rosemary, you're tangling a sprig of rosemary. And it was a very different process from trying to draw a botanical drawing to just come up with the step outs to make something that represents that botanical shape. So that was kind of what was in my head when I was deconstructing that pattern. So I hope you enjoy it. And if anybody had any issues downloading the step outs, I'll be happy to send them to you. So just pop an email to me and I'll reply with the scan attached. So all right. Well, I really thank you for spending time with me today and celebrating with me. This has been really lovely for me to see you all, and I always feel like, a complimentary class may not cost anything, but it costs your time, and that is valuable to me, and I appreciate you giving your time to share this class with me and to follow along because I just had so much fun creating it, and I love teaching and I love sharing. So thank you very much for doing that. And I hope that I'll see you again sometime in the future at something different. So all right. Well, I will let you go then. And I thank you again. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And those of you who are celebrating the holiday, enjoy your celebrations and happy tangling.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you. Okay.